Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn about the parasitic adaptations in helminth parasites. You know very well what is a parasite? The organism which lives on or in the body of other organism for the purpose of food, shelter or protection is called as a parasite. And the one which is providing all this, that is food, shelter and protection to a parasite, that organism is regarded as the host. And we know very well that kind of association is called as parasitism. So obviously, in order to live in the body of other organisms, these parasitic organisms have undergone so many modifications so that they can adapt to the environment which is present in the host. And that we will call it as, or we will study in the form of parasitic adaptations. And we are studying with reference to helminth parasites. Of course, the helminths like platyhelminthes or nematohelminthes, most of them are leading a parasitic life. And these helminth parasites mostly are leading a parasitic life in the intestine of man. So obviously, by leading a parasitic life inside the man, they are causing various sort of diseases to man. Then automatically we'll get a doubt. Human body is provided with so much well-developed immune system and all the different types of system. Then how they are able to live successfully in the man? So that only is nothing but due to parasitic adaptations. So what is an adaptation? The fitness of an organism to live in a specific habitat or in a specific environment is called as adaptation. And it is a kind of process of adjustment involved and to a characteristic that so the animal will adjust. And according to one scientist called Herbert Spencer, adaptability is the continuous adjustment of internal relation to external relation. Means internally whatever the changes that has to develop, that will come because of the changes in the external environment. So it is a kind of power of self-regulation, self-preservation and continuation of the race. So it will self-regulate, self-preserve and continue its animal species so that it can live perfectly in the host body and also give rise to the offsprings. So that is about the definition of parasitic adaptation. Now we will get a doubt. How this parasitism has begun? Because most of the organisms are leading a free living life. Then why or how this parasitism has begun? In the beginning, actually there was no parasite at all. But accidentally a chance of contact has come between two animals. Okay, a chance of contact has come between the two animals. Of course, both of them initially were free living. But step by step, the changes have come. Of course, which are very difficult to explain. But step by step, what happened? One of the organisms started behaving like a guest. And it started to lead dependent life upon the other organism, maybe either for the purpose of food or shelter. So automatically when one organism has started depending on the other organism, gradually it has shifted its mode of life from free living life to parasitic life. Because it is getting the food free of cost, getting the shelter free of cost, getting the protection free of cost from the other organism. So obviously, if everything is you are getting ready-made, will anyone try to work hard? Definitely not. So what it has done, gradually it started totally depending upon the organism, other organism, and in order to depend completely on that other organism, it has undergone some changes in its body, some changes in its life cycle, and gradually it has been transformed into a parasitic mode of life. And in order to live that parasitic life successfully in that specific environment, it has undergone so many modifications. And all that modifications together, we are referring it as parasitic adaptations. So almost all the parasites belonging to different kind of phyla, you may take protozoans or you may take helminths, they will show these adaptations. And our helminths, they are modified morphologically and as well as physiologically to live in the particular environment, because they are living in the body of human beings. So in order to lead that stressful mode of parasitic life, they have undergone so many modifications. And these modifications generally depend on the degree of parasitism. So we can study here under two headings. One is morphological adaptations and the second one is physiological adaptations. So let us see one after the other. Coming to morphological adaptations. We know pretty well that the platyhelminthes or nematodes are the first formed triploblastic and first formed argon grade of animals. That means you can say they are at the lowest bottom, okay, the lowest level in the argon grade of organization. But even then also, the helminth body is exhibiting some different types of modification to lead a parasitic mode of life. So let us see the structural modification in the helminths. So the structural modification also can be seen at the two levels. Number one, degeneration or the loss of some organs or maybe loss of some systems itself. So whatever the organs or whatever the systems it doesn't require, that are totally lost. Okay, so I don't want this system. So that is when it is not necessary, that system or that organ has undergone degeneration. So there is some loss of body parts or some systems also. And in addition to that, they are showing some attainment of new organs. Whatever the organs are necessary, that organs have been developed. So unnecessary organs have become degenerated, and whatever the organisms that are necessary have been formed newly by the organism. Now let us see which structures have undergone degeneration. Okay, so for example, there are some structures which are partially lost and there are some structures which are totally lost. So let us see what are the organs that have been lost. So that we can see with reference to locomotory, digestive system and sense organ. First let us come to locomotion or locomotory organs. So generally, for what purpose the organisms will show locomotion? Right, because we have studied in protozoa. Generally, the locomotion will be performed by the organism for the purpose of food, for the purpose of shelter, and for the purpose of protection from the enemies, and even for the purpose of reproduction, so that they can undergo mating. But when you see with reference to parasites, where they are living, they are not leading a free living life. They are living a parasitic life in the host body, where the food is readily available for them. Okay, because the host is eating the food and that food is getting digested in the host body. So ready-made food is available for the parasite. So no need of going for food for anywhere. Second thing, why it will be for protection. Already it is living inside the body of host. So there is no question of any enemy coming from outside and killing this. So automatically it is getting the protection. And shelter. It is living inside the body of other organism, that is a host. So without any effort, it is getting the food, shelter and protection. So obviously there is no need of any locomotory organs and any kind of locomotion. And that's why the organs of locomotion have been degenerated in our helminth parasites. But there are some free-living turbellarians. That free-living turbellarians will show the locomotory organs like cilia. But what I am saying, they are absent in kind of parasites. In the parasitic mode of helminth, their locomotory organs are totally absent. Now coming to the second one, alimentary canal. So we know very well, parasites are depending totally on the digested or the semi-digested food of the host. When it is getting the already pre-digested food, then where is the question of alimentary canal or digestive glands? No need at all. Okay, the ready-made food is coming for you. Will you go into the kitchen and prepare? Definitely not. So here also, as the food is readily available, there is no need of alimentary canal, no need of digestive glands. But we can see in the adult trematode, the alimentary canal is present where it is incomplete. And that is having some sort of suctorial pharynx. So with the help of that suctorial pharynx, it will suck the liquid food into the intestine. And in some cases, the gut may be simple or some cases completely eliminated. But in the case of cestoda, that is, we can say tapeworms, which are commonly known as tapeworm. In tapeworm, the alimentary canal is totally absent because most of the cestodes are living in the man. And automatically they are having the ready-made digested food. That's why they don't need any kind of alimentary canal. That's why it is totally absent in the cestoda. And in some cases, for example, the larval forms if you take like Rhedia or Microfilaria, in that cases, in that kind of larvae also, they don't need any alimentary canal because totally all these larval forms of parasites, they are surrounded by some sort of nutritious food. What is that nutritious food? You can take the blood. So obviously it is absorbing that nutritious food through the outer layer of their body. And that's why alimentary canal is totally degenerated in the parasites. Now coming to sensory organs, or you can say nervous system. When you come for the nervous system, why it is necessary? It is necessary in a free living organism so that it can observe what are the changes that are occurring in the environment. What are the stimuli that are occurring in the environment. So as per the changes in the environment, it will adjust itself to the environment. So where is the question with reference to parasites? They are living inside the body of the host where the conditions are always stable. When they are living in the stable environment, so automatically there is no need of any nervous system also. That's why in the parasites, they won't show any kind of well-developed nervous system, like central nervous system or peripheral nervous system is not well developed. But in some free-living trematodes, we can see the nervous system is developed. And nematodes will show some ganglia and some nerves, and cestode will possess 2 ganglia and few nerves. And circulatory system is also totally absent because what is the function of circulatory system? It will transport the nutrients, but that are not required in the parasite. So circulatory system is also absent. Now coming to sense organs. Why the sense organs are needed? Just now I told you they are needed so that they can see or they can observe the changes in the surrounding environment and they can respond to that stimuli. But because here they are not living any free living life, so automatically they are not required for the parasite, because always the conditions in the host body are stable. In Trematoda, the sense organs are absent, of course, but some sort of tango receptors. Tango means touch receptors. The touch receptors can be observed in the trematodes. And when you come for the nematodes, we can see the amphids are the sense organs which are present in the lips region, and in the tail region we can see some sense organs called as phasmids. So amphids are chemoreceptors, whereas the phasmids are glandulosensory in function. And when you come for the cestodes, say in the cestodes, the sense organs are totally absent. So the absence of complicated sensory structures is also related with the sedentary life in a sheltered habitat. But in the endoparasites, we cannot see that one. So the sense organs are totally absent. Now, when you come for the specializations are newly formed organs, so that we will be calling it as neoformations. Neo means new and formations means development. So in order to lead the parasitic life, they have reduced some old structures but developed some new structures. For what purpose they have developed the new structures? They have developed the new structures which are helpful in absorption of food material, protection, and the most important thing is for the purpose of attachment to the host body, because in order to live in the host body, they should be firmly attached somewhere in the internal environment of the host. So that attachment organs they have developed newly, and they are showing the well-developed reproduction. So let us see one after the other. Coming to the body form, we can see that in order to live in the host body, they have undergone the modification even in their shape. So they have developed such a body shape that they can offer the least resistance to the fluids of the host. If they are not developing such body form, what will happen? They will be expelled outside of the host body. For example, if you see the fasciola hepatica, how it will be? What is the shape of that fasciola hepatica? It will be dorso-ventrally flattened and leaf-like. Similarly, when you see the cystosoma, it is very thin and cylindrically elongated. And when you see the tinea solium, how it will be? It will be elongated, ribbon-like and dorso-ventrally flattened. Similarly, when you see the integument, what is integument? The body covering. So the body covering of all the parasite is regarded as integument, and how it is? It is thick, very thick in nature. Why? So that it can get the protection from the digestive juices. Not only that, this thick integument is provided with some spines or some sort of microvilli or some sort of scales. Now you may ask me, Madam, what is the use of this microvilli or the spines or scales, etc.? So these microvilli will help in increasing the surface area of absorption. So with the help of this microvilli, they will absorb the digested food material. And not only that, if you see the flukes, that is trematode, in that is very thin. Why it is thin? So that it can absorb the digested food directly. And the tegument also provides the protection against the action of digestive juices of the host. Now, as I told you just now, attachment. So it needs some sort of attachment organ so that it can stick to some body parts of the host. So for that purpose, they have developed certain special structures and getting attached to the body of the host. For example, we can take the tinea solium. Tinea solium, which is commonly called as tapeworm, it has developed the hooks and suckers. And where they are present? They are present on the scolex. So the scolex, which is having the hooks and suckers, with the help of that, it will get attached to the wall of the intestine. So much strong attachment that it will never detach from the wall of the intestine of the human being. And when you come for the ectoparasites, they are provided with hooks and suckers. And when you see the trematodes or flukes, we can see in them two suckers are present. One is called as oral sucker, which is present around the mouth. And one more is the ventral sucker, which is also known as acetabulum. So with the help of this oral sucker and ventral sucker, it will get attached to the host body. Then coming to the vast reproduction. So we can see in the parasite, digestive system is absent. Respiratory, circulatory, excretory, nervous system, all the systems are absent. Only one and only system is very well developed. What is that? A reproductive system. And this reproductive system is very, very efficient and having the high complexity. Because of that high complexity, it is shifting from free living form to parasitic forms. So how it is very efficient? It is having the large number of testes. Ovaries are present and the vitelline follicles, all these are present in the parasites. If you take the example of cestoda, about 90% of the space in the body is totally occupied by reproductive organs only. So see, 90% of the body is occupied by only reproductive organs, no other system. And the second case with reference to reproduction is hermaphroditism. So almost all the platyhelminth parasites will show hermaphroditism. What is hermaphrodite? Yeah, if at all any organism is showing both male and female reproductive organ in the same individual, then we are going to call it as hermaphrodite. So most of the parasites, most of the helminth parasites are hermaphrodite. Can you guess why? Can you guess why? Why? Because if at all the sexes are separate, there arises the problem of mating. They have to search for a mating and then undergo fertilization. But here, because both male and female are present in the same individual, the self-fertilization can occur, and even sometimes cross-fertilization also can occur by protandry or protogyny. Then coming to multiplication of reproductive organs. So in cestoda, the reproductive organs are much more elaborate and they are represented in each and every proglatid. We know very well the cestode body is divided into number of proglatids. So in each and every proglatid, both male and female reproductive organs are present. So this is called as multiplicity of reproductive organs. And we can see in cestode, after the mature proglatid, gravid proglatids are present. And in the gravid proglatid, all other organs or all other systems will be degenerated. Why? Because totally the gravid proglatids will be filled up with the branched uterus. So to accommodate the branched uterus, why the uterus is getting branched? It is accommodating large number of eggs. So in order to accommodate that large number of eggs, uterus gets branched, and in order to accommodate that branched uterus, the gravid proglatids are provided. And one more interesting point is here, the parasites are having the capacity to produce large number of eggs. You know, Ascaris will lay 2 lakhs eggs per day. Just imagine, per one day it is able to lay 2 lakh eggs. So imagine if all the eggs are going to develop into Ascaris, total your intestine will be filled with only Ascaris. Similarly, if you take some trematodes, they will be producing 10,000 eggs per day. You can see this Enterobius vermicularis. It will be producing 10,000 eggs per day. Taenia solium, if you take, each and every proglatid will be accommodating 30 to 35,000 eggs. So this large number of egg production is happening. Why? Because the parasite has to face so many number of difficulties, so many number of hazards. To escape from that hazard, it is producing the large number of eggs. Not only the large number of eggs, please, even it is producing the multiple number of embryos or multiple number of larval forms. What do you call that condition? Polyembryony. So they will show the polyembryony phenomena. Poly means many, embryony means embryo or larvae. So for example, if you take the life cycle of Fasciola hepatica, it will produce during its life cycle various stages like miracidium, sporocyst, rhedia, cercaria and metacercaria. These are the different types of larval forms in the life cycle of Fasciola. So here, miracidium will produce many number of sporocysts. Each sporocyst will produce 5 to 8 rhedia. And each redia will produce 14 to 20 cercaria. So what you are able to see here? The multiplication of embryos you are able to see. Multiple number of embryos are produced, and that is called as polyembryony. So similarly, the hydrated cyst can produce many number of scoli. And here the life cycle of parasites is very complex, and it is involving many number of larval stages. Why it is so? Because at every stage there may be a possibility that some of the eggs may be dying, or some of the larval form may be dying. Some of them may be dying at the embryonic condition. In that way, to avoid that chance of death, what is happening? It is producing a complex life cycle. And one more adaptation with reference to reproduction we can see is the presence of penetration glands. The name itself is indicating. In order to penetrate into the body of the host, the parasites have developed certain structures or certain glands. For example, you take the larva. Which larva? Miracidium. Miracidium is having apical papillae, which are the conical structures present at the anterior end. In addition to this apical papillae, they will show one pair of penetration glands also at the anterior end. And these glands, they will produce the histolytic enzymes. So that histolytic enzyme will help in dissolving the tissue of the host so that it can penetrate into the body of the host. So generally they are present in the larval stages. In the adult stages, we cannot see such penetration glands. But when you take the example of one nematode called as Ankylostoma duodenale, which is commonly called as hookworm, it is possessing these glands in the buccal region. And with the penetration gland secretion, it is producing one anticoagulant enzyme. One anticoagulating enzyme which is acting like histolytic enzyme. So what is that anticoagulant? Means which will prevent the clotting of blood. So that's how the adult worms will show some sort of buccal glands. Then coming to the physiological adaptations. So far whatever we have discussed, all that will come under morphological adaptations. Now let us see with reference to physiology what are the adaptations they have developed. Number 1, protective mechanisms. So we know very well most of the parasites are living in the body of the host, and definitely they have to protect themselves from the various substances that are produced by the host. So in order to protect itself from the action of digestive juices of the host, what are the adaptations they have developed? For example, the tapeworms. The tapeworm will produce a sort of mucus secretion, and that mucus secretion will form a protective coating around the parasite. And this protective coating gives the protection to the tapeworms from the action of digestive juices of the host. And the second one, what is that? In order to neutralize the digestive enzymes. So we know very well our digestive enzymes are either acidic in nature or alkaline in nature. So obviously either by acid or by alkaline, there may be a chance that the parasite may be destroyed. So to avoid that action of digestive juices, what they are doing, they are very clever enough. They are producing some anti-enzymes. And what these anti-enzymes will do? The anti-enzymes will neutralize the digestive juices or digestive enzymes of the host. See how clever they are. In 1957, one scientist called Green, he observed the presence of trypsin and chymotrypsin inhibitors in the body wall of Ascaris. Okay, so in the body wall of Ascaris, he observed some inhibitors. And not only that, these parasites, they are continuously renewing their protective body covering. For example, their body covering is tegumen. This tegumen will be periodically renewed, so that every time a new coating, And not only that, they are having the capacity to produce some special cells called as Lyme cells. Where we can observe these Lyme cells? Especially in the tapeworms. So these Lyme cells in the tapeworm, they will neutralize the acids which are produced by the host. And remember, the parasites can tolerate the high range of pH in between 4 to 11. Okay, so they can tolerate the pH range of 4 to 11. And the parasites which are living in the blood, they are also able to withstand the effects of antibodies. We know very well our immune system is producing some antibodies and some phagocytes, isn't it? So even from that antibodies and phagocytes are also, they are getting the protection. So for that also they are getting adapted. And second one is about the nutrition. So here, obviously, whatever the nutritional requirements are there for the parasites, all that will be fulfilled by host only. And the trematodes and nematodes, which are having the alimentary canal, they will feed on the both digested food and semi-digested food. And as I told you earlier only, in Cestoda, alimentary canal is completely absent, so they will feed on the digested food. And then next is about the respiration. So we will be getting a doubt. Madam, when they are living inside the body of the host, there won't be any oxygen availability and all that. Then how they are able to live? Right, it's a good question and good doubt. Of course, internally when they are living in the environment where there is oxygen is totally absent, automatically what they will choose? Yes, when the oxygen is not there, they will be preferring which one? Anaerobic type of respiration. What is anaerobic type of respiration? The respiration which takes place by the which takes place in the absence of oxygen. So by undergoing anaerobic respiration, they are deriving the oxygen from the foodstuff. So in the absence of oxygen, they will get the energy. How they are going to get the energy? By the fermentation of glycogen. So in that phenomena, the glycogen will be broken down into lactic acid, and from that they are going to get the energy. And the next is osmoregulation. So here, the osmotic pressure of body fluids of the parasites is almost all same with that of the host. So they are maintaining what? Isotonic body fluids. What is the meaning of isotonic? maintaining the concentration of body fluids equals to the concentration of body fluids of the host. Got it? What is that? The body fluids of the host concentration and the concentration of body fluids of the host is one and the same. When there is an isotonic medium, then obviously there is no necessity of osmoregulation. But when we see the tapeworms, that is cestode, the osmotic pressure is slightly higher than that of the surrounding medium. Okay, slightly higher than that of the surrounding medium. Why? Because of this, it is permitting the absorption of nutrients through their body wall. Because they are having somewhat higher concentration, they are able to absorb the nutrient through their body wall. Why? Because they do not show any alimentary canal. Now one more clever adaptation. What is that? Periodic appearance. What is this periodic appearance? That is, there are some parasites which will appear only at a certain definite period. Can I say the best example? What is that? Yes, the microfilaria larva of Wuchereria bancrofti. We know very well Wuchereria bancrofti is a nematode parasite living in the blood of man, causing a disease called as filariasis or elephantiasis. When we see the life cycle of this microfilaria larva, which is observed in the Wuchereria bancrofti, what is this doing? It is present in the deep-seated blood vessels during the daytime, but during the night time between 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., it will come to the peripheral blood circulation. Now can you guess why? Why it is remaining in the deep-seated blood vessels during the daytime and coming to peripheral blood vessels during the night time? Simple. Who is the vector for the Wuchereria bancrofti? Yes, female Culex mosquito. And when the mosquitoes will come and bite you? Yes, during the night time. So what is the feeding habitat of mosquitoes? They will feed only during the night time. So that's why during the night time, as the mosquitoes are feeding, in order to suit their mode of feeding, they are coming during the night time to the peripheral blood circulation so that they can be sucked by Culex mosquito. And this is called as nocturnal periodicity. So this nocturnal periodicity is exhibited by the parasitic larvae to suit the nocturnal mode of feeding of Culex mosquito. See how cleverly they are correlated with each other. And the next one is neoteny. What is neoteny? It is a special phenomena where the larvae are capable of undergoing reproduction and producing the young ones. So larvae, without undergoing development, they will undergo reproduction and produce the young one. So the neoteny is also exhibited by the parasites. And the next one, high fertility. So we have studied it is laying the number of eggs. So parasites develop enormous fertility, producing the millions of fertile eggs. And this is correlated with the passive transference of the infective stages of parasites from one host to another. So, because it is always transferred from one host to another host passively. What is the meaning of passively? Not directly from one host to another host, but involving some intermediate host. Okay, so what is happening? During this journey of transferring, there may be a possibility that Some of the stages may be dying at the egg stage only. Some of them may be dying at the embryonic stage. So to avoid all these hazards, to face all these problems, they have developed high fertility and they are producing as many number of eggs as possible. So sometimes, for example, in fasciola, sometimes the eggs may fall in water. Sometimes the miracidium may not be finding the intermediate host. Which is the intermediate host for fasciola? Snail. So if they don't find this intermediate host snail within 24 hours, the miracidium larva will die. In the similar way, they may not be getting the suitable medium for encystation, or sometimes in the embryonic condition they may be ingested by some other host. Like that, at every stage of their life cycle, they have to face the problems. So to avoid that all the problem, they are producing as many number of eggs as possible. Even if the out of million, some lakhs eggs also die, some eggs will be remaining. Similarly, I told you earlier only, they are showing the multiplication of larval stages also, that is polyembryony. And the next one is, one more big problem the parasites will face is the transference of infective stages. This is a major problem for the parasites. So for that, they have developed some adaptations. Generally, two kinds of transference will be there. One is active transfer, second one is passive transfer. What is active transfer? This is somewhat less common method. Means what is that? Directly the infective stages will be entering into the final host. So directly they will make the way, they will pierce the skin of host and they will be entering into the host body. For example, you can take the larvae of hookworm, the larvae of schistosoma, etc. Then what is the passive transfer? This is the most common method which involves some intermediate host. It is not going directly to the final host, but some intermediate host will be there. And that will be transferred from one host to another host with the help of one intermediate host. And by which method? It may be by contamination. That is contamination of food and water. It may be by inoculation. What is inoculation? Like sucking of blood. Like mosquitoes will suck the blood and then they will introduce the parasites. Sometimes the oral infection may occur when the host takes the uncooked food or contaminated water. For example, you take the Taenia solium. Taenia solium will be transferred from one host to another host. How? By eating the uncooked measly pork. If the measly pork is not properly cooked and a person consumes such improperly cooked measly pork, then the stages of Taenia solium will enter into the body of a new host. So like that, by various methods like contamination, inoculation, the passive transfer will occur. So when we are studying all this parasitic adaptation, what we are able to observe? What did you observe? Yeah, the parasites are very, very intelligent enough. Like all other organisms, so they have accepted the challenge of the changing environment of the host and they have modified themselves so that they can lead a successful parasitic mode of life in the host. So the parasites will always change in such a way so that they can establish an equilibrium with the host. And as long as the equilibrium is maintained, there is no question of disease in the host. But whenever the equilibrium is disturbed, the disease will occur. So see you in the next class. Thank you.